face, but you know how these companies work. It takes them weeks to get people set up working from home and all that other stuff and the processes involved. And they've literally only had a couple of weeks to get this done. So how do you get a team of field agents converted into work from home agents with not just a small time frame, but they're not used to it. They're not being cooped up in an office, let alone in an office, let alone being cooped up at home all day without going to see their clients, their customers, and all that sort of stuff. But look, to understand the situation and I guess help sales teams across the globe more effectively, I've put together 7 simple steps to help you enable your work from home strategy. So we'll move on to step 1. Okay, first you need the right technology. Now this might seem really simple and you might be going, well, isn't that common sense? And if you look at that setup there, it looks like someone's about to play Flight Simulator or something like that, right? But at the end of the day, the reality is you do need good technology. Your IT support team is no longer a walk away like they used to be in the office. You haven't got people to pick people's brains sitting next to you going, oh, have you tried turning it on and off? Oh, that sounds really simple. That does actually work half the time. But no, you need a good laptop. You need or a desktop if that's something that you are using. You need something that's reliable. Okay, you need a Lenovo, a Dell, an Apple, whatever it may be. Don't get anything cheap and make sure it's got good specs because you're going to need it to be running overtime if you've got 7, 8, 9 Excel sheets running, or you're running a webinar plus you're taking notes. Plus there's 5 other different things happening in the background. You need about 16 gigabytes of RAM. A lot of people think 8's enough. I'm telling you now, if you're working from home and you've got as a sales rep especially, you're going to need 16 gigabytes of RAM. Just trust me on that. If you're using a headset, buy yourself a good headset. Don't buy a cheap one. Get yourself a Platonics or even a Bose headset, whatever you think's good. Platonics are pretty good. They're like mid-market. They're pretty strong and reliable, and they last you a few years. But just on this one, just remember that your team and not your IT team are not going to be able to help you in a flash like they used to. And I know, I get it. Some IT teams are outsourced anyway, and you have to call someone over in my side of the world to get support, even within your organization. But at the end of the day, look, it's important that you all understand that, the right technology is really important. Brand new laptop if possible, backup laptop if possible, backup charger, always keep a spare laptop charger. They do tend to break. Spare cables, spare Ethernet cables, and that sort of stuff. Spare, routers, spare monitor if you've got one. It seems silly, but right now, for me, especially if I wanted to go and buy a new monitor out here in the Philippines right now, I'd really struggle to find one. I'd have to go hunting across the expat network because delivery from a company like Alibaba or Amazon is just not going to happen at this time. So moving on to the next one. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask me as I go through this. Okay, one of the most important, if not the most important aspect of working from home, you need a reliable network. Not just talking about the internet, but your network as well. You need to make sure wherever your router is in your house, whether it's cable, whether it's fiber, whether it's dial-up, or I doubt it's going to be dial-up, or ADSL, whatever it is, right? Make sure that your computer is connected to that router by some form of Ethernet. Do not trust Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is fantastic. Don't get me wrong. If you're streaming, Netflix for at HD or 4K, stick with Wi-Fi. That's fine. And even then, I'd recommend using Ethernet. But for reliable infrastructure that's fast, that doesn't drop out, especially if you're using VoIP, you need to have an Ethernet connection with your router. Please, just trust me on that. If you have to sit in a room next to your router, just do it, or just buy yourself an Ethernet cable, and you can buy the clippers and everything. It'll cost you near enough to nothing, or just move everything so it's closer to your router and wire up. That's really, really important. Obviously, with the internet, make sure you've got a good internet connection. You don't need a 100 megabit connection for a VoIP service. A 15 to 20 megabit would be good enough for most people working from home. If you're uploading or downloading videos, look, in all honesty, I still think that a 20 megabit connection is good enough unless you're doing sort of heavy HD or 4K video as part of your work. As long as it's fiber, try and do fiber. If you're stuck with DSL or ADSL, which not many people are these days, just try and get the best available. Don't get if it's in Australia, try not to get a lower, cheaper provider like Dodo. Try and go with Telstra if it's ADSL. I found in my experience, they give you the best speeds. But for anyone else in the world, go for fiber. and try and get at least sort of 15 to 20 megabits. That should be enough for you, unless you're doing sort of extreme 4K uploads, okay? Try and have a backup as well. A lot of people don't realize that internets do drop out. And something that I've realized, and I don't know if anyone else has, it's working from home, is the internet has a tendency to get overloaded when everyone is on it. Now, most people, work people are on it. It seems to be okay. They're doing things like what we're doing, webinars and calls. But the second, and even kids, they're doing their, video conferencing in their work. But the second everyone finishes work, and kids including, and they all jump on Netflix and other things and multiplayer games, I'm telling you now, if you haven't all experienced this, the internet starts slowing down. My 50 megabit connection goes down to 2 megabit connect. Now, everyone's not going to experience this, but just my personal experience is from 4 o'clock Philippine time or 3:30 Philippine time, which is about 5:30, 6 o'clock Australian time. So it's a good thing for me being behind the clock. Or the internet just dies to about 2 megabits, right? I can still make calls. I wouldn't want to because it's just unreliable. But the reality is, I know that I've got a crystal clear and a great infrastructure till about 3:30. Now, the way around that, if you do need to still continue working while the internet's slow, a lot of people, again, don't realize is 4G on your phone is not as smashed as the cable internet, right? The physical plugged internet. So I would recommend, or highly recommend, having your internet, wired up. Having a backup device like a 4G with 10, 15 gigabytes of data sitting next to you. What I found is when I do find that the internet is being throttled and it's difficult for me to make calls, and as a high-end, telemarketing company, the last thing I want to do is be making rubbish calls to my clients and them going, what the hell's going on? This is not, a service we want to be a part of, right? So I'll jump on a 4G and I'll connect that to my laptop, and then I've got crystal clear connection again, right? That works very well. If I need to make calls after 6 o'clock Australian time, which is quite rare, but I do occasionally need to do it. So if that helps. So in terms of infrastructure and network, really, really important that you get that right. Even if you have to share someone's internet connection, no worries. You might have a few people in the house using the internet. Make sure it's Etherneted up, because you'll get the priority on that traffic, especially if there's 2 or 3 of you working from home. And if your kids are jumping on Netflix and other things during the day, I'd probably try and put a stop on that, or put some software in to try and restrict their I guess the amount of data or whatever you call it they can get from the home router. Okay. Okay, good. So moving on. And the other thing I was going to mention, most laptops these days, especially the new, swanky, skinny laptops, they do not have Ethernet ports, right? Get it, 100%. They're trying to make them as small as possible. iPhones don't have headphone jacks anymore. So all you got to do is buy one of those USB. You can buy them in most stores, most technology stores, or online. Online, like I said, might be difficult, but if you haven't got one, just go down to your store and pick one up. It's a USB-3 Ethernet cable, and you just plug that in, and you've got yourself a super Ethernet connection, and you plug that straight into your router. Okay. All right, moving on. If it will let me. Okay, this sort of is an extension of the infrastructure and internet. But look, this is something that I've learned personally over the last few weeks. You 100% need to have a good VoIP mobile setup, especially if you're running some sort of customer service, even if you're working inside a large technology organization or any company and you're calling clients. You cannot call them on a poor line. It's extremely unprofessional. It doesn't look great. And yeah, some people will be forgiving if they know you, I guess. I get it. In these times, people probably have the same problem with slow internet. But honestly, it does not look good calling anyone, especially if you're a company like mine, where we're based on the other side of the world. And already there's a reputation in some of these developing countries that the infrastructure is poor, which used to be the case 10, 15 years ago, but it just isn't anymore. So you just got to have a good VoIP provider. And this isn't just a case of going online and paying, $9.99 for the cheapest provider you can find. You've got to reach out to some reseller, or, like a Telstra reseller, or that provides business services, or Optus business services, whatever it may be, and pay decent money to get it set up. Skype does work, but I would call it more of a backup, and just trust me on that. Skype does not have the right technology or infrastructure to provide reliable phone calls compared to some of the VoIP companies out there. Ones that I'd recommend, and you can do this anyone from a two-seater to a 30, 40, 50-seater. There's technology such as Ring Central. Ring Central's pretty cost effective, and they utilize some of the best telephony. I believe the terminology is called UCAS. That's UCASS. UCAS, which is a competitor of, say, CX1 Nice, which is another provider that a company Nice provide. So that's more for the sort of middle and upper market. So there are plenty of options out there, but just make sure you invest your time and investigate and go for a good provider. Skype will not cut it as a long-term solution. Keep Skype as your backup. Set up a $23 a month or put on $20 a month as a backup on Skype. So when your phone line does go down or it does go crap, which it does, just trust me on that, no matter how good of a VoIP service you do use, at some point, once a month for an hour or two, it's going to go shit. And that's unfortunately just how these providers work. But at the end of the day, you've got to have a great VoIP provider via VPN or whatever way you connect to your network, and your company will probably provide that for you. Anyway, if you're a business owner, invest in a good one. Does not have to be super expensive. There's plenty of cheap ones, but get a good provider for your VoIP service. And for your mobile phone, the same. Like I mentioned before, you've got your mobile phone as a backup. Your mobile phone provides 4G. Your mobile phone is a great way to call people. Now, of course, if you're calling people and if you're offshore, for example, which some of you may be, and you're on the other side of the world, you're not going to be using your mobile phone. It's going to cost you a fortune if you've got an Australian SIM card on your phone. But most people sitting in Australia or the UK or the US, you can use, and most people I find do, they use their phone to contact people, right? And honestly, I think it's a great backup. You got your VoIP number and you've got your mobile phone either way. But with your mobile phone, even if you've got a spare mobile phone sitting around, have two mobile phones set up at all times. Have a pay-as-you-go, whatever you want to call it, SIM card in another phone. So you've got two mobile phones, you've got VoIP, and you've got Skype. So you've got no excuse for infrastructure crashing. And the reason I'm saying this and I'm blabbering on a little bit about this is because honestly, in these times when networks and everything are completely and utterly congested with everyone working from home, just like the COVID-19 virus, everyone's trying to do their best thing. People are being criticizing, but no one really understands how to fix the problem yet, right? And no one really understands, because we're in a new world, what it means to have this many people on the internet at this time. Are companies ready? They probably are to some extent, but one day we might lose our mobile phone for the entire day just because we weren't ready for a massive surge of people using mobile phones, but for whatever reason, right? So just have a backup available is my advice at all times. Moving on. You need to invest in user-friendly management and tracking software. Now, this is an interesting one, and it may not apply to everyone, but there's two sides of the coin. One side is you're running a team of people that need to be tracked, and perhaps they're in the Philippines or India or somewhere else, and you're on the other side of the world. There's really good software that you can set up called Time Doctor, which is actually what I use for my team. Now, I personally don't micromanage my team, but it's there if I need it. So I can jump on there. It'll take screenshots if you want. You can actually turn that function off if you don't want to be that intrusive. It'll track the usage, the number of hours. It's actually a good way, I find, more than anything, to clock in and clock out. So if there's any issues when my staff clock in and clock out using this remote tool that we have, then I can go onto Time Doctor and go, well, hang on a minute, you didn't start work till 10 o'clock, not 9 o'clock, according to Time Doctor. And that is a really, really good way of tracking your team. Now, I'm not saying everyone needs to do this, but the reality is, you may need to track what your team are doing and maybe the number of calls if you're running a call center. But probably more importantly, if you're a manager and you're running a team, just understanding and collaborating in terms of what their activities are. So there's free software out there. There's one called Monday.com, which is a project management piece of software, which would be great for people working from home. You can assign tasks to people. There's a whole bunch of different things that you can set up. Even Microsoft had one for a long time within their Microsoft Power. I think it was called OneNote, and you can track and share information. So just make sure you've got a way of tracking your team, not just in terms of micromanagement, because you may not need that, and your team are more mature enough to manage that themselves, but for sharing and collaborating in terms of sharing notes on projects, really important, not just to do that over the phone. And yes, there's a CRM you can use. There's plenty of CRMs that you can use. I'll go into more detail on that. But my point here was more about you know, the ability to track. If you need to track your staff, there is software out there which will enable you to do that. So we got one more person joining the conference, guys. I'm just going to admit them now. Just give me 1 second. All right. Welcome, Richard. Okay. So moving on. And there's also other tools that you can utilize: Time Doctor, Hub Staff, Manic Time. There's a whole bunch of different tools that you can utilize, and I'll repeat those again: Time Doctor, Hub Staff, which I believe is owned by HubSpot, I believe, and Manic Time, which are all ways of tracking your staff if you need to track them, if you've got an offshore team that are now working from home, or you just need to manage a team, whatever way you think is fair and appropriate. And other tools out there you'll need just to track I guess their timing that they've been working and that sort of stuff. All right, moving on. Okay, utilize virtual webinar software. I can't stress this enough, guys. Converting meetings to virtual requires major change. It really does. As coming from someone like me, myself, I run a virtual business. I can run this company anywhere in the world if I choose to. I choose to run it from my office most of the time. Right now, obviously, we're all at home. I can't do that. You must have not just the right infrastructure. It's very easy to get the right tools. So if you want recommendations of tools, WebEx, I'd recommend Zoom Conference, Cisco Meetings, GoToMeeting. All of those are great tools. Now, I personally would recommend Zoom. You've been hearing a bit of news about Zoom recently, about people infrastructuring, jumping into Zoom. I think Zoom, out of all the tools that I've tried, is one of the most simplest tools out there. And they've actually just released a whole bunch of patches, which has fixed all the issues with the security. So I've been reading that Google and other companies have been saying, you know, we stopped our staff from using Zoom. I honestly think it's the best tool out there. And from what I've seen, they fixed their security issues as well. Okay. The other side of the coin. So yes, getting the conference tools is also great, but having to convert into that virtual setup, like I said, myself, I've been doing this for years. I'm used to virtualizing with everyone, my clients, onboarding staff, whatever it may be, virtually. And it took a bit of time to set that up, but there's a lot of companies out there that just aren't used to that. You know, if you're sitting in a team, if you're sitting in a team of people in an environment where your friend knocks you on the shoulder and says, hey, do you want a coffee? Or hey, there's a bit of banter going on in the office. And all of a sudden, all that's gone. And now you're sitting in your own little room with a dog or a cat. And that's your only company now, right? And it can drive people mad. Like this quarantine, like it's driving me mad. But at the end of the day, we're moving through it. We're keeping ourselves busy. And that can be really challenging for people. So my biggest point on utilizing virtual webinar software is don't just use it as a way of collaborating. It's really important for collaborating. You need to share information. You need to set up calls with your manager. You need to call your clients, your account, your prospects, all that sort of stuff. Use it as a way to stay sane. Talk to your friends on the other side of the world, pick their brain, talk to your colleagues, you know, have a bit of banter, talk about what they're up to today, have a bit of a laugh, share news stories. That will keep you sane. So you've got the professional side of it, really important, but there's also the sanity side, which I've learned recently, where, you know, you can't ever beat face-to-face, I get it, but the next best thing, video conference, you'll feel much better when you start collaborating with more people, all right? And the last point I'll make on WebEx tools, have more than one. Most of them are free. Zoom will give you 45-minute calls for free. Skype's free. Pay for Zoom though, don't be a cheapskate, because it's only $20 a month or USD or whatever it is, and it'll give you the full, you know, for 3 or 4 hours, as many people as you want on a conference. But you can always have one as a backup, like GoToMeeting or Skype or whatever it may be. All right. Moving on, point 6. This kind of relates to point 5 with video conferencing, but just keep collaborating with your team. Really, really important. Run weekly or even daily calls with your team and manager, because I'm telling you now, you'll forget these things. You'll forget. We're all busy as it is, and sometimes having a nudge on your shoulder by your manager or one of your teammates or even the people, your own team that you're managing, to say, hey, are we going to do our one-on-one and catch up, which is what I would get quite regularly, because I get so busy I forget. You don't have that anymore, right? You know, you've got Messenger and stuff like that, but you'd lose that physical connection with people. So you need to keep collaborating. You don't want to become a loner and isolate yourself away from people, which is very easy to happen. You've got to make sure that you're collaborating professionally on projects. You've got to make sure you're collaborating in terms of the organization and what's happening. You've got to make sure you're collaborating on every shape or form. On what's happening in terms of tasks and who's responsible for what. Conflict management. How do you manage conflict over virtual, right? That's probably a whole new session, right? That we could run a whole session on. It's a very different world out there, but just you need to keep collaborating. And in terms of there's some recommendations here I've got for managing tasks. A few here I've got teamwork, task world, monday.com, as I mentioned before. This is probably not just using video conferencing. This is also utilizing these tools that help you to collaborate in terms of information and intelligence sharing. Okay. For large corporations, there's a few that I've come across. Exactly. They're a company that work with Salesforce. They provide commission management, budget management. Salesforce, you've got Chatter, and in Salesforce, you've also got obviously they've got about 50 plus integration tools and more that help you to integrate and collaborate and share information, commission details, pipeline, all that sort of stuff. Seismic Software, another good one that I came across recently. But there's tons out there, right? So make sure you're A, set up with the right collaboration software, and B, you've got the right collaboration strategy that should have been communicated with you, which may have not have been, but it should have been communicated with you by your company, depending on the size of it, right? They're all in kind of this drastic planning stage at the moment, strategy planning. So you may still be in the middle of that, but at the end of the day, yeah, you need to work with your manager on the best approach for managing that and collaborating and weekly calls and all that sort of stuff. All right, moving on to point 7. Okay, implementing an effective CRM with team tracking on KPIs, territory alignment. Let's go back. Really, really important that every organization, I don't care if you've got 1 employee, I don't care if you've got 50 employees, you have to have a CRM of some sort set up to manage pipeline, to manage employee KPIs if possible, territory assignment, lead management, commission management, and much, much more. You need a CRM so everyone is speaking from the same hymn sheet. Now, from personal experience, I struggled when I brought my CRM to my team. I went with HubSpot, and my team from their previous companies all turned around and said, "Oh, why aren't we using Salesforce? What's wrong with Salesforce?" I'm like, well, Salesforce costs 10 times as much as HubSpot. And guess what? HubSpot's actually free as we're a small business, so I pay for it now. So it's a great starting point. They weren't happy with it at all. And it can be hard to implement something. They of course love it now, and they've spent a number of years using it, and it's got some great functionality. They just weren't aware of the tool. But I made one simple rule with my team that quickly made them love the tool. I made a rule that simply stated, if it's not in the CRM, it never happened, all right? And I know we've heard this saying many times throughout our careers. I'm sure many of us have heard it. If it's not in the CRM, it never happened. I don't care if it's not in your lovely if it's in your lovely Excel sheet, and I can see it looks very pretty with colors, but it's not in our CRM, and it doesn't have a date stamp. So that opportunity or lead is not yours unless you can prove otherwise. So yeah, as you can imagine, that one simple rule changed everything right now. The fact that we're all working from home, it 100% reinforces that rule, right? It's not so easy for me to walk around or for them to walk up to me in the office and say, "Hey, Matt, I've got this opportunity. Am I going to get paid commission on it? Can you check?" "Oh, well, it's not in the CRM. Let's see if we can have a chat in the room and find out what went wrong." So just make sure you've got a good CRM. You collaborate on there. Pipelines tracked the right way. You split territories the right way. The CRM can be your kind of master kind of regulator, if you want to call it that, if there's anything that goes wrong and you need to manage your various teams and whatever's needed. But make sure you have a CRM set up in the right way as well. You need to be able to track your pipeline build. Managers need to go in there and check visibility on where leads are, close deals, and your team's general activity. And on top of this, you may want to add additional features to your CRM that help with lead management, territory assignments, KPI, and commission management. Look, Salesforce provides a wide of features such as VoIP integration. There's a company called Natterbox I have a good friend that works for, and they provide a great VoIP integration into Salesforce. There's Microsoft Navigator. There's a whole bunch of different things that you can look at as well. So make sure you add additional selling tools for your field sales teams as well on top of that. So make sure you use things like LinkedIn Navigator, Lucia, Hoover's, a whole bunch out there that you should be using for your team working from home. You should be using this anyway, right? This should already be within your organization. I'm just reinforcing the point. Now, I know I said 7 points, but I've added a little extra one. I think this is very, very important. So we're all working from home, right? So now is the time for cyber criminals. This is a great time for them. Now they're reaping the cream of the crop, right? We're all working from home. We're all open to vulnerabilities. We're all on VPNs and we're all accessing our corporate networks, right? Perfect opportunities for cyber criminals. I have to be honest. I've had more emails and I nearly stuffed up. So I got an email that said someone's been remotely accessing your Twitter account, and I went, oh, well, this isn't good. And it was very legit. It looked, just like when LinkedIn or Google say, check who's logged in on it, and you click on it, it goes to a Twitter link, and it says someone from South Africa's been used to trying to log into your Twitter account. I went, oh shit. Okay, I better change my password right now. And I was on my phone. I went on there and it said, enter your new password. And I entered my new password once. I entered it twice. And I stopped myself and went, hang on a minute. That doesn't seem right. Why hasn't it asked me for my old password? Why would it just take me to a random link and not ask me for my old password? And I stopped myself and I went to Twitter and I checked my password and I checked recent attacks on the official Twitter page, nothing at all. So people are getting very clever and it's only going to get worse. The bad sectors, unfortunately, are using this pandemic to increase their hacking activities, especially with phishing and ransomware attacks, right? Now, especially if you're a remote worker and you're using a VPN and you're accessing your company's infrastructure, you need to have a good security set up in place. Now, taking into account that remote workers are using a mixed infrastructure, as I've managed before, I'm repeating myself again, which includes both company and employee supplied equipment. Provide security as managed services that provide both the tools and expertise that cover all security issues with associate. So what's this? Issues I'm reading notes at the same time, guys. A good friend of mine sent over to me, one of my clients. All security is associated with remote workers. So you've got to provide security as a managed service. You need that set up in order, your organization needs that set up the right way to make sure that you're secure. And really your ideal solution will be supported by a security operations center, including 24/7 monitoring of all traffic that can be done externally for you by good organizations out there, by suppliers and security organizations to provide these types of services. This includes both authorized and unauthorized traffic, alters and triaging of identified problems. Actually, if anyone has any questions, I've got a chap on here called Richard Cotter. I'll unmute you now, Richard. So apologies if my intro wasn't too great. But you can reach out to Richard Cotter anytime. I can send you his details, or I want to do a wrap up at the end of this. I'll just include, I can include his email on there. But Richard, I don't know if you want to jump in and maybe give a better overview than I did. I've got you unmuted if you want to jump in.
No, thanks very much for that, Matthew. No, you did a great job. For the sake of a webinar like this, I couldn't add any more to what you've said. I think everybody's got a growing awareness that security is more critical than ever, cyber security. I think the whole concept of remote workers is something that the coronavirus has accelerated, and I see more and more news coverage that more organizations are considering making remote working more of a norm rather than an exception. So I'd encourage everybody to have a very, very close look at security because it can be done cost effectively. It doesn't have to be an enormous cost, and that's why security as a service gives you two things for a reasonable cost, and that gives you the tools that you need and the expertise that you need. So it does take a load off the business.
Thank you, Richard. I appreciate your overview. Okay, guys, so unfortunately, I probably made, for the ones that joined late, I probably made the mistake of actually having a webinar at 9 a.m. After an Easter holiday. I just assumed no one was going to be going away, but that's all right. I assume 9 a.m. would be the perfect time to run this. Anyway, we've got about 30 plus attendees that haven't turned up for probably bound to those very reasons. So this webinar has been recorded. And if anyone has any issues with me, I don't think they should do, because I don't think anyone other than Richard. Just let me know, Richard, if you're happy for me to provide the recordings out. If you've got any issues with that, as I've got you recorded on there as well. But I'll be sending this to all the attendees that did not attend the event, and I'll probably do some sort of follow-up webinar as well. But if I sort of unmute everyone, which I'm doing right now, has anyone got any questions for me?
No, pretty clear, Matt.
No worries, Dan. There's Dan, you all right?
Yes, that's right, yeah.
Good stuff, Dan. Excellent. Derek?
Maybe if you just want to talk a little bit about the difference in sort of running a sales meeting on in a virtual Zoom environment versus face-to-face for field reps, who that was their previous go-to.
Put me on the spot. I like it. Very good. So maybe just sort of go into a bit more detail. So running a sales meeting and how you should structure it, or what would be involved in that process?
Well, just I guess the difference between doing it virtually versus face-to-face as you're converting a field rep to a sort of inside sales rep.
That's a very good question. Yeah, it's very, very different doing it virtually. What actually helps, it helps if the people that are involved in the sales call that you're running, or the training call, it really, really helps if they have exposure to this already. Face-to-face is a lot more engaging. You're sitting with someone, you've got a whiteboard presentation. In some ways, it's just a lot more personal, right? So when you're running a a virtual seminar, one thing that I noticed was really, really different. If you stuff it up, right, or if there's some sort of conflict or misunderstanding over the phone, it is 10 times harder to fix that when you're doing it over a virtual webinar. So I've had clients I've onboarded, and I might have said the wrong thing for whatever reason, or a miscommunication. And I've actually had a client turn around once on an onboarding call saying, that's not how we work. I'm afraid we're going to have to end this call. Well, just hang on a minute. I think that I had to literally jump in and raise my voice, say, hang on, what's the misunderstanding here? And it was a misunderstanding between one of our processes, which wasn't even accurate. It was just assumed that way based on the communication on the call. Whereas if you're face-to-face, A, that probably wouldn't have even been a misunderstanding. And B, you would have been able to fix it. But you're right, you're in front of them. It's not like someone's going to jump up and walk away. So that's the biggest difference. So when you're trying to convert, say, your sales teams, and you're running trials, and then you're running sales training meetings, or whatever it may be that you're running on a Skype call, whether it's or for example, an onboarding call. If you're onboarding someone, make sure you give very, very clear instructions. Have those instructions written out on a to-do list. And probably one of the most important things is make sure you provide visibility on what that agenda is going to look like in some form, a PDF, a Word document, to the other people on that call, right? Because when you're on a webinar, another big problem is we all like to get distracted, right? I'm on my phone right now, I'm checking my emails, I'm doing this. Oh, what did he say again? And you don't want to interrupt the person, right? Maybe it's your manager that you just ignored, or it's a client, you've gone, oh shit, I didn't hear that last thing he said. If I ask again, I'm going to sound like a right muppet, right? At the end of the day, if you share what you're talking about and you have it documented, that helps significantly, given the fact that you're doing it virtually. Does that answer your question, Derek, to some extent?
Yeah, no, that's a really good clarification and example. Thanks, Matt.
No worries. All right, does anyone else have any questions, or is everyone all good?
What about sort of hiring during these times? So remote hiring, remote interviewing, remote sort of onboarding, because often a lot of those are done face-to-face, even for inside sales roles. So do you have any perspective on those?
I do, yeah. I've just written an article on that, actually, and I probably not the best timing, but I was trying something different. I actually sent that article on LinkedIn and to my MailChimp yesterday on how you should be onboarding employees remotely. Now, it's very different to onboard employees remotely, and that goes back to my initial point. So whether it's interviewing employees or whatever it may be, when I interview my team personally, I have to do it remotely to start with. I'll do, if you're hiring people for a sales role, you should be doing mock role play. So once they've passed your HR and maybe one of the hiring managers and it's got through to maybe the sales director, let's just say I'm a sales director, as a remote setup, if I'm hiring a sales rep, I will do at least 1, 2, or 3 role plays with them. And I need to be comfortable that they're damn good on the phone. They know how to problem solve and they can think on the spot, right? Once I tick that box, then generally I bring them in the office face to face. Now I have on rare occasions where I've been away overseas or whatever it may be, and I haven't been able to interview them face to face, right? So I've had to take a bit of a risk and gone, well, I've done 5 calls with them. They sound great. I've done a webinar with them. Let's bring them on board. Now, I don't have the article in front of me right now, but I'm actually going to answer your question, Derek, I'm going to bring that article right up. So just bear with me because there's some great answers. I'll send this article to all of you at the end. So back to Derek's question, onboarding employees virtually is very, very different, right? We've all been a new employee once, right? So we all know how daunting it is, but we all know how, I guess, friendly it can be when we're sitting in an office and people come up to us and go, hey, welcome to the team. Remotely, you don't have any of that, right? So, you've got people sitting there in this new work environment and new culture that they know nothing about or they know very little about. And they're like, shit, like how do I access how do I access this webinar? How do I talk to people? Who's who and who's what? So I'll go to the article now and I'll give you a bit of an idea on what I personally think are the right ways of doing it. So educating your teams on best virtual practices for onboarding, really, really important. So my best piece of advice for for organizations that want to do virtual onboarding is they have to educate everyone. They have to educate the managers, they have to educate the staff. They need to know what those processes look like internally, okay? And they need to make sure that everyone's on the same page. There needs to be an onboarding program that they all follow, right? One of the first cogs of the wheel. Then you've got to provide your onboarding employees with the right guidance. You need to give them the right guidance to onboard. You've got to give them they need to know what the process looks like. So you just hired someone, congratulations, welcome to the team. This is what the next 2-3 weeks looks like. This is what it's going to look like via webinar. Here are the top people to contact in the company if you've got IT issue support, payroll issues. This is a hierarchy of your team. These are other organizations that you can talk to within the company. Here are some heads of departments. Feel free to reach out and chat to them. That's really, really important because they're not going to get that intelligence that quickly remotely as well, right? So get them prepared, get them ready for the role. Really, really important. Another big one, and I read this, I believe it was one of the Harvard studies that was done on remote working, streamline the number of activities, right? I think they worked out there's something like 54 activities that are done during a hiring process, right? That's insane, right? You just can't do that remotely. You just can't. You've got to get that down to maybe 15, 20, 25 simple processes that include online training, collaborations, sessions, and all that sort of stuff. You've got to keep it streamlined. Otherwise, you're going to have a high turnover rate with employees just getting confused and maybe even getting bored. Yeah, so that's what I'd recommend, Derek. Take advantage of digital tools to streamline the process. There's plenty of tools out there. Collaboration tools, again, some of the ones that I've mentioned before. Really, really important that probably one of the biggest thing I would say is if you're the CEO of the company, and a couple of you are on this call, just make sure you have educated your team and managers on how to onboard people. If you're onboarding people yourself as a CEO, you're a small company, just make sure you educate your potential employees or new employees what those processes look like, right? Let them know what week 1 to week 12 is going to look like for them, and let them know who they can talk to. Make them feel comfortable. Document everything. Do it over a webinar. Do it over a PDF. It doesn't matter. Just give them the right intelligence to be successful. Does that help, Derek?
Yeah, that's really good. Thanks, Matt.
No worries. So look, if no one else has any other questions, let's wrap up for the moment. And next time, I've learned a valuable lesson myself, not to run webinars at 9 a.m. after an Easter long weekend. I assumed, I took the risk and thought people would be up nice and early like me at 5 a.m. or 5 a.m. for me here in the Philippines. Maybe not everyone is as energetic after an Easter holiday, right? Plus, we have an alcohol ban here in the Philippines, so it's not like I can drink at the moment. So, yeah. But look, really appreciate your time, everyone. Stay in touch for the next session that we're going to do. The next session is going to be on onboarding new employees. So, Derek, that was a really good question. And the best practices to do that. I've written an article on that. So, I think it'd be really good for everyone to join, and I'll work out some better time to do that. Maybe Friday at 7 in the evening, right? It's probably a better time or not. But I'll be in touch with everyone, and I'll send a copy of this webinar to all of you to take a look at. Really appreciate your time, guys. Have a great week ahead.